Okay, so we're going to switch things up a little bit tonight for our talk on anxiety, stress, and sleep. And Alexis is going to go first and kick us off with a talk on homeopathy. So let me just hand over controls to her. There you go. You should be able to share your screen now.
Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm going to go into my display mode so I can't see any of you. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat and Sangita will let me know and I can stop at any time and answer your questions. But I can't see any of you, so raising your hand or gesticulating will not get my attention. You have to shout at me. Let's see. Also, just make sure that you're muted and then feel free to unmute to ask a question and then remute yourself. So tonight, Sangita and I are going to talk about stress, anxiety, and sleep. What a combo to be talking about time. And I was putting this slideshow together as we were going through the election and post-election, and I thought there is no better topic than this right now. So as always, I just want to briefly cover what homeopathy is for people who are going to be watching this later who might not know. It'll take just a couple of minutes. So homeopathy is a specific modality of alternative medicine. It's discrete, unique to itself, not the same as naturopathy, not the same as herbs, not the same as supplements. The remedies that we use are specifically formulated in a homeopathic manner. We get them from homeopathic pharmacies. You can see some of them in the picture there. There are over 3,000 homeopathic remedies, and you might be familiar with arnica, which is very widely known, and these remedies are available at Whole Foods. You might have seen arnica at Whole Foods by the checkout stand. And in homeopathy, a remedy is chosen for you based on your unique symptoms, which is really what stands it apart from Western medicine, which is more one-size-fits-all medicine. It's energetic, meaning that the remedies are minute diluted doses that stimulate your vitality and body systems to return your body to health. It's gentle, there are no side effects. It's safe for all ages and conditions. It's effective, inexpensive, non-toxic, and green medicine. It's widely available at health food stores and online, and it's based on simple principles. The simple principle that it's based on is called the law of similars, which states like cures like. What does that mean? It means that we match a patient's symptoms to the known symptoms of a remedy. So we're looking for the patient's symptoms and the symptoms of the remedy to be alike. So let me give you an example. So we've all gotten a bruise from falling down or hitting ourselves on something. And we all know that a bruise has these common symptoms. It's sore, it's painful to touch, it's swollen, and it often has some kind of discoloration ranging like a rainbow, right? Black, blue, yellow, purple, green. It's just blood underneath the surface of our skin that's getting slowly assimilated into our bodies after some trauma to soft tissue. So when we have a bruise, we're finding a remedy with these symptoms, and then the symptoms of the bruise will subside. So we look at a remedy called arnica. Arnica, the most popular remedy, is a specific for physical trauma. Injuries, falls, blows, contusions. A contusion is a fancy word for a big old bruise. It's got a sore, lame, bruised feeling. So let's say you fall down, or you fall down the stairs, or you're walking your dog and you trip and you fall down on the sidewalk, and you're going to end up, even on an area where you're not bruised, you're going to feel sore all over. And that is a feeling in arnica that is characteristic to that remedy. It's worse from being touched or even approached, actually. People are like, no, I'm fine, don't touch me. There are bruises from injury, and of course black and blue spots or dusky mottled spots, just like we saw in the picture before, with painful swelling. So we give arnica to a person with bruising, and it relieves the pain, swelling, and bruising very quickly. And this can be bruising from a surgery. It can be bruising from falling down. It can be bruising for any reason, because this remedy arnica is specific for bruising in particular as a result from trauma to soft tissue. So that is an example of using homeopathy for acute care. So you get a bruise, that's acute care. It's an acute condition that arises and resolves in a short time. And homeopathy can be used effectively and easily by anyone in acute situations with some training and the tools that you need. And what are the tools you need? You need remedies. That's the picture there at the top. You need a book to tell you which remedy to give. So you need those two. You need the book to tell you the remedy, and then you need the remedy in order to give what the book says to do.
Well,
And then,
I can't talk right now.
sorry, was there a question? Oh, sounds like someone needs to mute their microphone. Then we also have a booklet there that I've written that it just runs through how you give remedies, how it works. And that would also be information that would be found in a home guide as well. So these are the tools you need at home to use homeopathy at home. So then there are also chronic conditions. What about conditions that arise and don't resolve? What if they stay for years or months? These are chronic problems. And homeopathy also treats chronic problems using the same principle of like cures like. And the goal is to restore harmony and balance to the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. So when you're treating chronic disease, it can be most effective to work with a professional homeopath rather than trying to treat yourself. Like for the bruise, you can treat yourself. But for chronic things, migraines, allergies, depression, anxiety, these things are best treated with constitutional or chronic care. So this includes stress, anxiety, and sleep problems. Now today we are going to be talking about acute remedies that you can use yourself, treating yourself at home for these conditions. But you might find that these things that I'm presenting don't quite fit you, and it's a bigger problem, or maybe it partially helps, but not completely. And then these are things you could go to a professional homeopath to resolve. So we're going to start with stress, anxiety, and sleep. So starting with stress activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is in opposition to the parasympathetic nervous system in your body. So the sympathetic nervous system is what is turned on when we're in danger. It's fight or flight. We have to run away. There's a tiger coming and we have to run. And the opposite is the parasympathetic nervous system, where we get to rest and digest. So what's happening for us right now is that stress is activating our nervous systems all the time. And we really never get a break. Even our phone notifying us that we got an Instagram like is activating our sympathetic nervous system. We can't even feel that, but that's what's happening inside our bodies. So we have acute symptoms of stress, and this is, of course, not at all a comprehensive list, but you may experience headaches, depression, insomnia, rapid breathing, pounding heart, stomach issues, GI issues, diarrhea, for example, tension, more frequent illnesses, difficulty concentrating, vertigo. This is just a short list of the possible things that you might feel. You might not even be aware of your own stress. It is easy to just become accustomed to how we feel and not even really know how stressed we are. There are long-term effects of stress, which are the reason to do something about it, because long-term effects of stress are weakened immune system, which leads to frequent illnesses and sets you up for autoimmune issues. It increases your blood sugar, which leads to weight gain and diabetes. It messes with your neurotransmitters, which leads to depression and anxiety. It causes menstrual cycle changes. It can cause hair loss, insomnia. It can cause hormone dysregulation, leading to thyroid and adrenal dysfunction, among many hormones. cognitive impairment, and negative gut microbe changes. And that is a big one because, as I'm sure Sangita is going to go into, the gut is really an important part of our immune system. And we are in symbiosis with our gut microbiome, and we want it to be as healthy as possible. So if stress kills our good bacteria in our microbiome, that is bad for us overall. So what do we need to do? We need to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, it used to be that when we were sitting around the fire, the tiger came, we ran away, then somebody killed the tiger went away, or it ate something else, and then we went back to the fire and we immediately returned to our parasympathetic nervous system. That's not happening anymore, because now instead of a tiger, we have our phone, we have our kids, we have our work, we have our computers that we're on all the time. So we have to actually work to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And this list that you see in front of you is another not comprehensive list. There are many things that will activate your parasympathetic nervous system, but these are some things that you can do. And the important thing with doing this is that you have a regular practice of doing it. Now, we cannot all have a regular practice of getting a massage. Now, I wish that were the case, but it really is not true. So the best things on this list to turn into a regular practice are things like meditation, mindfulness, gratitude, exercise, or something like breathing exercises, or even binaural beats. I didn't put an arrow next to that one, but that's something that you can do every single day. And this is why I cannot stress enough that, no pun intended, how important it is to have a regular de-stressing practice that you do every single day. And it makes a tremendous difference to really bring your body back down into that parasympathetic system. So now, that being said, after you meditate and do your float tank and get your massage, we're going to talk about acute care homeopathic remedies. So we're going to start with Nux vomica. Nux vomica, the person who needs Nux vomica is going to feel really irritable. It is the main quality of this remedy: irritable, angry, impatient, angry with no provocation. This is the person who gets road rage or gets infuriated in the grocery store line with the clerk who's brand new and keeps making mistakes. Anger from contradiction. They can be very easily offended. And then there's the quality of fastidiousness. So they're very fastidious and orderly, which can lead to obsessive compulsive behaviors. And this can include cleanliness behaviors. Perhaps they're worried about germs, and so they're washing their hands too often. They're really oversensitive in every way, oversensitive to light, to noise, to touch. Every sense is highly acute and makes them irritable. So they tend to turn to coffee, alcohol, drugs for stimulation and then for sedation. So coffee to wake up, whiskey to go to sleep. And of course, this leads to a hangover. This is a great hangover remedy, just as an aside. This is a person who needs to be stimulated to get going and then needs to be sedated to get to settle down again, because their natural, normal rhythms are very disrupted. They often have a constipation problem with a never finished feeling. They go, it just doesn't feel like they got it all out. There's still some remaining. And then rumbling and loud stomach sounds. These are all symptoms of stress, having dysregulated GI activity. Okay, next remedy is Ignatia. First, I'll stop and ask if there are any questions about Nux vomica or anything so far that I've said. And I'm going to take the silence as a no. Okay, so Ignatia. Ignatia is a wonderful grief remedy. It's what we use a lot when people have had a sudden shock or grief. And I think that we can all relate to a feeling this election cycle of feeling a lot of grief and shock, no matter which side you are on or where you fall in the spectrum. It was really an incredibly stressful time. And these feelings of grief and shock for Ignatia often come after a disappointment or bad news. A person who needs Ignatia is oversensitive, highly emotional, and moody. I don't like the word hysterical and its origins, but I would say hysterical is how Ignatia appears. Just very overreactive, oversensitive, touchy, getting wildly emotional, quarreling, fighting, sighing, insomnia from grief or worries, a sensation of the lump in the throat that needs to be swallowed down, but it never goes away. And then extreme flatulence with rumbling bowels. So if this set of things looks like you, this would be a great remedy to take. Natrum muriaticum, another wonderful remedy that we often give for grief, has a very different kind of presentation. The person who needs Natrum muriaticum is going to be more withdrawn, more reserved. They're going to have a feeling of depression and a feeling of isolation. And there's often depression after a grief or disappointment. And what Nat Muir often does is dwell on past disagreeable events. Another way of saying that is that they hold grudges. So they might think about something terrible that someone did to them, or they might think about, a time that was better, and then something bad happened and now it's never been well since then. For example, my grandmother was married for about 20 years, and then her husband died in his mid-50s, and she spent the rest of her life, which was 45 more years, grieving her husband and could never move on. And he was the picture of perfection, and it was like time stood still. And I often think to myself, if only I had known about homeopathy, I could have helped her move on from that. And so Nat Muir also has a lot of sighing, sulking, despairing. It's a very down state, a feeling of introversion and kind of being reserved and closed off, like no one will ever understand my grief. And they kind of hold themselves separate from other people. And they're very sensitive. They have a need for this unconditional love. There's often one person or one animal that just gives them exactly what they need, and that's all they want. Some physical symptoms of Natrum muriaticum can be ears buzzing, ringing, or roaring. A very big migraine headache remedy, especially if it's worse from sunlight or grief. Grief is a big etiology for this remedy. If things are coming on after grief, we often look at Natrum muriaticum. They often get canker sores, herpes eruptions, or fever blisters. And of course, sleeplessness from grief or dwelling on past events, lying in bed, thinking about all the things that have gone wrong. This is very much Natrum muriaticum. And here we have pulsatilla. Pulsatilla, very different state. The person who needs pulsatilla is going to be more moody, more emotional, more tearful, craving affection and consolation and sympathy, which makes them feel better. So then they feel better after that. They can also be irritable and touchy and easily offended. They can be kind of changeable, so they can flip-flop from one thing to another. They crave open, fresh air, so that means that they would want the windows down in the car. They want the window open in the bedroom when they're sleeping. They want to feel that fresh air, and they really are aggravated by the stuffy air. They may have a distended abdomen with loud rumbling. You see, that's a common theme with these stress remedies. It's a stress response. Bedwetting, mostly seen in children, is a big symptom. Constipation alternating with diarrhea, indigestion from fatty food, and vertigo. So this picture would look more like pulsatilla if this was something that you were. If this feels like, oh, that looks like me, then you might try pulsatilla. And at the end of this, we're going to talk about how to try the remedies. So symptoms of anxiety. So that was stress, which is, all these things kind of dovetail with one another. This is anxiety. So anxiety is a little bit more specific than just stress in general. It's a feeling of nervousness, restlessness, or tension, having a feeling of impending danger, panic, or doom, with rapid breathing, sweating, feeling tired, trouble sleeping, those GI troubles again. A hard time controlling the worry, wanting to avoid things that make you feel anxious, and kind of a trouble concentrating or thinking about anything else other than the worry. So the first thing that I would say if you have anxiety is run out and buy Bach flowers. This remedy called Rescue Remedy. It's a combination of 5 flower essences that are specifically picked to combat panic and give you a feeling of calm. I'm not going to read all of these, but this is what's in it. And you can keep them in your purse, your car, your bedside table. They have a formulation for adults. It comes in a dropper. It comes in a spray. It comes in a pastille. It comes in a thing for kids. It comes in a thing for pets. It's really, they've thought of everything for Rescue Remedy, and it's wonderful. It's like if you're on the plane and you feel nervous, have a little Rescue Remedy. Anytime, anywhere, Rescue Remedy is a go-to. So, but if we're talking about, and by the way, Bach flower remedies are homeopathic. They're prepared in a homeopathic manner, but they are slightly different than these preparations of homeopathic remedies. So in terms of homeopathic remedies, aconite, or this fancy Aconitum napellus, that's the full Latin name, has a feeling that she's going to die. It is truly a remedy for a moment in time when you think, I really am about to die. For example, I have a client who had a gas explosion on her street, a couple of doors down for her. And in that moment of the gas explosion, she really thought she and her family were going to die. Her house was going to blow up. That was going to be it. Her kids were home. We're all going to die. And even though they didn't, they were all stuck in this state of like feeling like they were going to die, and they all needed aconite. So this can happen anytime. It could be a car accident. It could be really bad news. It could be witnessing something violent or a car accident. It could be an earthquake, or your house was almost caught on fire, or your house did catch on fire and you barely escaped with your life. These are aconite type of situations. So the causation is mental and emotional shock. The person who needs aconite is having panic attacks. They're restless, tossing around. They look anxious. They've got palpitations. This aconite is also an excellent remedy for the first 24 hours of an illness, especially one that's come after a shock or an exposure to a cold wind. So all remedies have multiple purposes, but especially after a shock, if you get ill after a shock or a fever after a shock, aconite is a wonderful remedy. So aconite has sleeplessness from fear, fright, or anxiety, anxious dreams, and vertigo, or a sensation like you're intoxicated or dizzy inside your head. And then we have arsenicum album, another wonderful anxiety remedy. A person who needs arsenicum album is very panicky and anxious feeling. Panic attacks, tremendous anxiety, sometimes waking between 12 and 2 a.m. with more anxiety. And what characterizes arsenicum is this tremendous fear of germs and disease, and an anxiety about health. So as you can imagine, in this time with COVID, this is really coming forward as a remedy that I'm using a lot for people who might have had a mild fear of germs and disease that is suddenly really amplified by the situation. So they need constant reassurance. They're fastidious and perfectionistic, and they can become obsessive compulsive, again, with the hand washing or the cleaning, driven by this fear of disease and germs. Restlessness and pacing is very common. They're anxious about their family members. They have stomach aches, diarrhea, and insomnia. You can see there's a lot of overlap between these remedies and stress, anxiety, and sleep. So phosphorus, another wonderful remedy. I like to say that really every remedy is my favorite remedy. A person who needs phosphorus is very suggestible or impressionable. And what does that mean? That means that if they see something like the poster for the movie It, then they might be fine in that moment, but later that image is going to come back in their mind when they're trying to go to sleep, and they somehow can't get the thought out of their mind and they're afraid. And so you just suggest an idea to them and it impresses on them very easily, and it's hard to get that out of their minds. And that can make them very anxious and fearful. They're especially anxious when alone. So they always want to be in company. So you see kids who need phosphorus often wake up in the night, want to go sleep in their parents' bed, don't even go to sleep in their own bed. They just start out in their parents' bed because they feel so much safer with people around. There's a lot of fear to be alone, fear of the dark, and fear of disease, and worries about other people. There's a fear that something bad will happen. And again, this is another situation that is very present at this time. There's this fear that something bad is going to happen. Someone in my family is going to get COVID. My grandmother's going to get COVID. Someone's going to get sick and die. There's so much anxiety about illness and something bad happening right now that's very real. A person who needs phosphorus frequently will have nosebleeds, exhausting diarrhea, sore throats, and chest colds that always go to the lungs. I do see the nosebleeds more often in children than I do in adults, to be honest. All right, sleep issues. So sleep issues can run the gamut. You can have insomnia, difficulty going to sleep. You can have sleeplessness due to dwelling on things, racing thoughts, thinking about things I have to do or I'm responsible for, my to-do list. You can have frequent waking, like maybe you're easily awakened by disturbances. You're just a light sleeper, so a noise or light or something, or someone rolling over in the bed. You can wake in the night unable to go back to sleep. Or maybe you have nightmares. So there are lots of things that could be off kilter in sleep. And there are many reasons for that. So oftentimes you can get down to the reason for the sleep disturbance, and that's very helpful. But just as an acute remedy, again, we have rescue sleep. This is just like rescue remedy, but with one additional flower that is helpful for racing thoughts. So this is another great thing, comes in a spray, comes in these little melty things that you just pop in your mouth before you go to bed. Very helpful, totally no risk, possible benefit. Just have it by your bedside. So our number one remedy for difficulty sleeping is Coffea cruda, which, like it sounds, is made from coffee. So imagine that you've had too much coffee. What does that feel like? And you can imagine the state of Coffea cruda. It's a state of insomnia, waking from the slightest disturbance, due to an excitement of the mind. So there are rapid thinking, uncontrollable thoughts, or a racing mind, like just so many things going on in there. It's really a state of excitement and overstimulation. So, and it could be excitement, like good excitement, like Christmas Eve. The kids can't go to sleep because they're so excited about the next morning. That's sleeplessness from excitement. So it's not a bad thing. It's just that it causes sleeplessness. Everybody run out and get some Coffea cruda for your kids for Christmas Eve. It's really this overstimulated nervous system, which also shows up as a great sensitivity to noise, taste, and other stimuli, which is why you wake up from those disturbances. Also, you can have tinnitus or a buzzing sensation in the head. And it can counteract the bad effects of drinking too much coffee. So maybe you had too much, now you can't go to sleep, you could have some Coffea cruda. Our next one is Cocculus indicus, a wonderful, wonderful remedy. So Cocculus is a remedy that has this ailments from loss of sleep. So we've all had periods of time in our life where we have a loss of sleep, but when a person is in a cocculus state, they are extremely sensitive to that loss of sleep. So we often see this in times of night watching, which you can see there on your screen. But what does that mean? It means you're worrying and caring for others. So for example, the biggest example of night watching is a mom or a dad staying up because their child is sick and they keep going in to check on them, or they stay awake watching them and they're worried about their health, or you're caring for an elderly person who might be ill and you yourself sacrifice your sleep in order to take care of someone else. And that is the main thing. This is the main remedy for ailments arising out of that, because in cocculus, even the slightest loss of sleep aggravates. Even an hour, like normally I get 8 and tonight I got 7, and even that has made me feel sick. And how cocculus often feels is having vertigo or nausea. So cocculus is a wonderful car sickness remedy because vertigo and nausea are a big part of this remedy, and it can equally arise from motion sickness, or it can arise from sleeplessness. And they can have frank vertigo with the room spinning and they have to lie down. So there can be sleeplessness from worry, anxiety, and restlessness, anxious, frightful dreams, sleep frequently interrupted by waking and starting, like they fall asleep in the chair. They wake up to make sure, is everybody still breathing? Is everybody still alive? Did the asthma treatment work? Is everyone still here? And then as a result, they get a slowness or a dullness of their senses or mind because they feel like they've almost been intoxicated. And then they have an intolerance of noise or anything disturbing. Wonderful remedy. Keep it in the car for car sickness and think of it for sleeplessness. Oh, and of course, a fear of not sleeping. That's something I see a lot in my insomnia patients, is that as nighttime approaches, they start to worry that they're not going to be able to sleep. And then that, of course, is a vicious cycle. So then we have aconite. Again, I'll just quickly go through it. Another remedy if sleeplessness with restlessness, fear, fright, anxiety, a fear of the future, nightmares, anxious dreams, dreams about fright or anxiety, particularly sleeplessness after a fright or a shock, as we talked about before, especially waking 1 to 2 hours after falling asleep with a fright, but it only started after witnessing a car accident or the gas explosion or an earthquake or whatever it is. And then arsenicum, same thing, disturbed, anxious, restless sleep, insomnia with that aggravation between midnight and 2 a.m., or not even being able to go to sleep at all until 2 a.m., anxious dreams or feeling anxiety even while you're asleep, sleeplessness from anxiety, nervous exhaustion or restlessness, dreams of death or dead people, dreams full of care, sorrow, and fear. So, and misfortunes and vexations too. So you can see that these two remedies, there is a great overlap between anxiety and sleep. The two go often hand in hand. So how do you go about using these remedies that I've talked about? So as I said before, the best thing is to have the remedies on hand and the book that tells you what remedy to give. And then what's in the middle there is my little guide, which you can download very easily from my website. I'll have the link later, or I can send it to you directly if you send me an email. And having the remedies in the book are the two tools that you need. And so here is the basics of how you give an acute remedy. So first, you choose the remedy that you're going to give. And this has already been chosen for you because I've given you this presentation. So you say to yourself, I'm sleepless. It totally sounds like cafe cruda. I've got all these thoughts. I can't stop thinking in order to go to sleep. So you start by giving the remedy 2 to 3 times a day for 2 days. Now with the sleep issue, I might do that right before bed as well. So maybe make it midday and before bed. And then you assess whether the remedy is working. In an urgent situation, you repeat the remedy hourly and assess in a few hours or at the end of the day. In an emergency, you can repeat the remedy as often as every 15 minutes. So let's take the example of, I just happen to be sleepless. That's not an emergency. It's just a basic thing that you're trying to resolve, and you're going to see if the remedy is going to work. You can give it a couple of days, couple of nights, maybe even 3 nights. Let's say that you have acute anxiety because you were in a car accident. That's an emergency. You might need aconite every 15 minutes in order to maintain or return to a sense of equilibrium. I'm not going to talk too much more about that, but I can always answer your questions later if you have questions about that, and it's written in more extensively in my handout. So if possible, I like to allow an overnight sleep to take place during the assessment of a remedy, because a lot of things can change overnight. People can take a remedy all day and not feel too much, and then they sleep and they wake up and they feel very different. So I always like to include a sleep, if I can, in that assessment. Third thing, use a 30C potency. So when you buy a kit, like you see in the photo there, buy a 30C potency kit, or go to Whole Foods and buy remedies there, and those are going to be in a 30C. So low potencies like 6X, 6C, 12C are less effective, and higher potencies like 200C and 1M should be prescribed by a professional homeopath. So you cannot go wrong with a 30C potency. And then how do you assess? So let's say you give the remedy for 2 days, patient is recovered. In this case, you're now sleeping fine. Yay, you can stop the remedy and celebrate. Now, with the sleeping problem, you might need to give it a few more times. You might need to take it once a night or once before bed in order to continue feeling the benefits of it. Let's say that you give the remedy and the patient, which might be yourself, is 25 to 85% better. That means continue giving the remedy until you get 100% better. Let's say the symptoms are somewhat better, mentally much better. Keep giving the remedy until the person is 90% better, because oftentimes physical symptoms can lag when mental symptoms bounce right back. So if you see a person who needs Nat Mure and they are not so depressed, not holding grudges, not dwelling on bad things, but they've got, a couple of physical symptoms, just keep going, because those physical symptoms will catch up with the mental symptoms. How about if a patient is a little bit better, but the main symptoms are no better? That's when you need to stop and retake the case, give a different remedy. If the patient is the same or worse, stop giving the remedy, retake the case, and give a different remedy. So this will be in more detail in the books that you buy or my pamphlet. So what about issues for sleep with lifestyle changes? So if you wake up in the middle of the night, unable to go back to sleep, I wanted to give you 3 possible things that could make that better, that have worked well for me and for my clients. So before bed, you could try taking collagen. You could try half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of raw honey, or 1 teaspoon of MCT oil, or you could do a combination of these things. Now, I want to clarify that I don't think it's okay to eat before bed. This does not count as eating. It just counts as food for your brain, to allow your brain to have enough energy so that it doesn't need to wake you up in the middle of the night to get itself some more fuel. There are a lot of lifestyle changes for sleep troubles that you can easily do. The number one thing is to block blue light. So the way that we go to sleep is that our bodies follow a circadian rhythm, and as it gets dark, our bodies start to produce melatonin, which makes us sleepy. Now, back in the caveman days, that was great. We went to sleep when it got dark. We only had a fire. That was it. We didn't, keep it going all night. We just went to sleep, and then we got up when the sun came up. But what happens is that blue light that happens when the sun rises stops your melatonin from being produced and instead produces cortisol. So if we are looking at our screens and our phones and even light bulbs in our house, we are exposing ourselves to blue light and we are shutting down melatonin production. So if you just block the blue light, you will make a massive difference. And the way that I do that is to wear blue blockers. I buy blue light blocking glasses that look red. And I walk around looking like an alien, and I feel sleepy about half an hour after I put them on. It's really amazing. So I suggest that everybody do that. Make your bedroom as dark as possible or wear an eye mask. Go to bed and wake up at the same time 7 days a week. This supports that circadian rhythm that your body and all of your hormones are following. Finish all eating 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. So that means you're done at 7, you go to bed at 10, no eating after 7, no coffee after 2 p.m. Make your bedroom cool below 68 degrees, not like in your bed, like your bed is warm, but your bedroom is cool. And a nice tip is to write a to-do list for the next day when you get into bed, especially if you have those thoughts about, oh, my responsibilities and so forth. And then you can try melatonin, and magnesium can be very helpful for going to bed as well. So I'm going to do 2 quick cases. So the first case is a 50-year-old woman with acute anxiety and germophobia right at the beginning of the pandemic, which you'll see was literally March 18th, the day after the shutdown. One day after the shutdown in California, my client called me. She says, I'm worried about how serious this is. I keep worrying that I have it because I have a runny nose. What if I'm a carrier? What if I get it and I don't survive? What if my parents get it? I used to worry about germs. She had a big germophobia issue earlier on. I had that under control, but now I worry about my hands getting germs the whole time. She's completely overwhelmed by it. Even in my own house, I'm washing my hands every 15 minutes. I wash my hands every time I touch my face accidentally, or if I touch something that someone else has touched, I wash my hands, or if I go in the bathroom and touch a surface, I wash because maybe I touched a surface. I just toss and turn all night having dreams that I have it. I worry that I'll get sicker while I'm sleeping and that I can't control. I'm worried that my kids are missing stuff while they're in online school. It makes me sad. They're not going to learn the same amount. They're going to miss out. Nobody knows what to think. Nobody knows what's going to happen. It's just one big uncertainty. Then she tells me she got very freaked out by an email she got from a doctor, probably like a newsletter that the doctor sent out. She said not to take Tylenol or ibuprofen, and it completely freaked her out. So I had to spend a bunch of time going over the email with her, explaining everything to her, reassuring her. And then I said, don't read these emails anymore because they're just too provocative for you. Then she's worried about her husband. Every time he gets sick, it goes to his lungs. He's got a cough. He needs a cough drop every night. Maybe it's allergies, but now I'm worried. She's completely freaking out. I use a wipe on my car door handle and my steering wheel every day. Is that normal? She doesn't know how normal she is. So if you've seen my presentations before, you know that we are always looking for the totality of symptoms for each person because everyone's in a unique state. So we're looking for the remedy that matches their totality. So in this case, I gave her arsenicum album. And you could see from my description of arsenicum album earlier why that fit, the germophobia, the anxiety, really feeling out of control. So then she calls me 6 months later. I had no calls in the interim. I gave her the arsenicum and then I didn't hear from her. And she says, oh, I'm doing so much better. I'm incredibly well. I got the fear of germs again in July. Remember that first was in March. And so in July, I started getting fearful again. I took the remedy again. Then I felt fine again. I have no unusual or extreme worry about germs or getting sick. I questioned her very closely about this. And she says, so now let me tell you what's going on right now, which was something completely different. So it had an immediate effect of calming her down, making her sort of normalizing, like, oh, it's okay for me to touch things in my own house and so forth like that. Here's another case of a 36-year-old woman with acute vertigo from stress and sleeplessness. So she calls me at 9:30 in the morning and she says, I have vertigo. Everything is spinning. Lying down, I feel like my body is spinning. It is completely impossible to function. It's worst when I get up and move, so I cannot do that. I have to lie down. And when my eyes are open, everything is spinning. When my eyes are closed, everything is spinning. So she says it started last night when we were out to dinner. The room was spinning and she had been drinking champagne, so she thought that's what it was. So then when she stood up at the restaurant, she really felt it. This was before the pandemic, by the way. I felt like I'd been drinking way too much and the room was spinning. And then she had to get up in the night with her 4-year-old, and she felt like she drunkenly stumbled into his room, even though she just had one glass of champagne. She told me she's been under a lot of stress recently from someone in their business behaving badly. And she felt very, very angry about it, but she hasn't been able to say so, to express it. So I ask her how her sleep is, and she laughs. She says, I was sleeping great several weeks ago, but first the baby was waking up several times, not being able to soothe. And then the 4-year-old's been waking up sometimes multiple times a night and wants me to stay. I'm waking up at least 5 times a night. So I gave her Cocculus, and that is the vertigo sleeplessness remedy that we talked about. I said, here's a 200C. And I'm also giving you a 1M if needed. Her situation was extreme. So later that day, so remember that was 9:30 in the morning. So at 2 p.m., she calls me and she says, I'm 50% better from the 200C potency. I say, great. I'm able to tolerate the kids. I went out for a walk on the street. But then at 3 p.m., she calls me and says, I'm not doing well. I feel awful. I feel terrible. I have to lie down again. So I'm going to take the 1M. So I say, okay. And at 5 p.m., she calls me and she says, I feel 98% better. I'm totally resolved. And after that, she said, I feel really good. I feel fine. And then it was resolved. And I believe, if I remember the case correctly, the next day she might have felt a little bit. She took another dose and then it was completely gone and never returned. So it's all about finding the right remedy for you. Everybody is unique and they have a unique constellation of symptoms that we find a remedy that matches. But a remedy isn't always enough. You need other things to be healthy. You have to remove the things that are making you sick. You might need to change your diet, change your lifestyle, make other changes in your life. You need stress reduction, sleep, whole healthy foods, exercise. You need playtime, downtime. You need connecting time with people, with your spouse, your friends. And we can find ways of doing these things even with COVID. And we must in order to maintain our mental health. We also need radical downtime, which is time doing nothing, just to allow our bodies to settle down. And doing nothing does not mean looking at Instagram or just flipping through Reddit. Downtime is really like staring into space or sitting on a bench looking at a lake. That's what our bodies need to get back into that parasympathetic state. So I'm going to put here again the resources, the kits that you can get, the books you can get, my practical guide, which is available for download, or I'm happy to send you the link to that for anybody that wants it. And this is me. And so I'm going to stop sharing so that we can hear from Sangita. There we go.
And I'm back. Hi. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to switch gears a little bit and go into the naturopathic side of things. Let me pull up my presentation here. If I can get it. This is always the tricky part for me. There we go. Okay. Oh, you have to make me the host again, Alexis.
Oh, gosh.
The little dots in the upper right-hand corner of my picture.
Make host. Change host. There you go.
There we go. Okay. So here we go. We're going to start with this beautiful picture of a rose. Stress, anxiety, and sleep. So I took this photo on the streets of Berkeley in front of someone's house, and it's not doctored at all. That's just what the flower looked like. And I wanted to start with this picture, and I threw in a lot of pictures in tonight's presentation from nature, because it's one of the things right now during COVID that a lot of us have access to. We don't have access to one another quite as much as we normally do, and that causes a lot of stress, anxiety, a sense of isolation and depression. But we do have access to nature, even just beautiful flowers on the streets of Berkeley. So if you take a moment to just stare into that flower, at least when I do it, gives me a sense of sort of calm and peace, and my mind just sort of goes blank, like a little mini meditation. So looking at beautiful things is something we can always come back to. So this is me, naturopathic doctor and dog lover, and that is my dog, or was. She died 2 years ago, but that is Sophia down there in the right-hand corner. I threw in some photos of my dogs. I'm not married and don't have kids, so dogs are kind of my thing. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about tonight is the things we can do to help us, especially in these very weird times that we're living in, when we don't always have access to the things that normally make us feel better. Luckily, I do still have access to my dog, the other one, who you'll see in a minute. There's my email if anyone wants it. So we're going to start with number one, just talking about stress, and no one is exempt. This happens to us all. It's a natural part of life. So some key points that I want to cover, and this will be fairly quick. We're going to talk about what stress actually is very specifically and where it comes from. Anxiety versus fear and worry, and how they're a little different, and how sometimes even in our own minds we can get confused about what it is we're actually feeling. And then self-care and stress management, how can we balance those things out with our daily habits? And then my little favorite jewel at the end, when it isn't just stress, talking about how sometimes we chalk things up to not managing stress well or having extra stress in our lives, and we justify or we use that as the reason for everything that's going wrong in our physical bodies or in our minds. And sometimes that's not the whole story. And that's kind of what I do in my practice. So I'm going to add a little bit of that in at the end. So stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires an adjustment or response. So I chose this, I changed it a little, but I chose this specific definition because it says that stress is a reaction. It's not an external thing. There are external triggers. The body reacts to these things, these changes. The body reacts to stress with changes in physical, mental, and emotional responses, but it's normal. You can experience stress from your environment, your body, and your thoughts. But I just want to underline that it really is the body's reaction. Stress is a reaction. So not every situation that we as individuals might think is stressful. Like it might seem very stressful if you've got a pending deadline at work. And a lot of times we think, well, that would be stressful for everyone. But that's not really true. Not all of us experience these reactions in the same way. So what's stressful for you may not feel stressful for me, and vice versa. So it really is your individual body's reaction to these triggers. And that comes in handy to think of it that way when we talk about different types of stress. So there's acute and chronic. Acute is, Alexis went into a lot of this with that great presentation on the acute remedies. So acute illnesses are a type of acute stress, colds, flus, etc., things that come and go pretty much on their own or with a little help from us. Pregnancy is actually an acute stress because it has a beginning and an end, but it takes a lot of work for the body. An acute relationship breakup is if it comes and goes relatively quickly, is an acute stress. A fight with a friend, any really intense physical activity, like beyond what you normally do, that's also an acute stress on the physical body, but it passes and your body repairs itself, no problem. And then food poisoning, I threw that one in there because that's something I deal with a lot in my practice. But typically food poisoning is something at least we think of as coming and going relatively quickly. And then chronic things, this is more of what I think a lot of us deal with. So that we're in a very acutely stressful period of time in the world right now, and we're all feeling that to varying degrees. But chronic stress is really what wreaks havoc on our bodies and our minds over time. So chronic illness is a big form of chronic stress on the physical, mental, and emotional body. And again, this is mainly what I do in my practice, so that's why I threw it in at the top of the list. And then also all the other things we think of, you know, a bad working environment that you're stuck in for long periods of time, maybe even years. Relationships, same thing. Repeated stressors in childhood, which could be in the home or at school, like bullying. Repeated intense physical activity. So this is sort of like people who are Olympic athletes, for example, are known to have shorter lifespans because they've pushed their bodies beyond the average physical capacity so much and so repeated that they create chronic stress on their physical body. And then starvation or overeating, so under or overeating are things that also cause chronic stress because the body has to repeatedly adapt to that new environment. So those are the types of stress. And then our response to that stress is usually not always. There can be other things, like Alexis mentioned, anger. People can also be very irritable, but because anxiety was our topic, I threw in anxiety, worry, and fear as kind of three legs of a stool. That very adorable dog in the background there is my dog Henry. I took that this afternoon on a walk. So anxiety, rather than just being physical or mental, anxiety is really characterized by feelings. It's something we feel in our body. We feel tension. We might also have worried thoughts, but there's always some physical component. We might feel vibrations in our body. We might have heart palpitations, sweating. Trembling is a big one. It could be actually visually trembling externally or only internal sensation of trembling. And then that feeling of that something could go wrong at any moment, or a feeling of impending doom. And I'm going to come back to that one in a little bit because that is something that I see a lot in chronic illness. And I think sometimes that's not all in our heads. It's actually a physiological response to something else. And it can be a clue that something's gone wrong internally. So anxiety, worry, and fear, I bring this up because I think a lot of times people will say I'm anxious because it's a word we hear a lot in our culture, when really what they're doing is just worrying. Or you have someone who's a chronic worrier. They've just always been that way since they were young. They worry about everything. They worry about themselves. They worry about others. They worry if people like them. They just worry, worry, worry. And worry is mental machination. It's just we're stuck in our heads. We're worried about the what ifs of life. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it's really a chronic habit pattern that usually starts early in life. And then we just build it like a rut or on a record, those lines, the little lines in a vinyl record. They're just habitual patterns that the more we do them, the more fixed they become. But when worry, which is mostly mental, also pairs with physical symptoms, then you get that anxiety, that sort of buzzing, chugging engine paired with worry that has a physical component. It often feels uncontrollable to people, coming on suddenly. It is typically triggered by external things, but not always. Sometimes people will say that their sense of anxiety comes out of nowhere and they really can't pin it on anything. And physiologically, we'll also touch on this a little bit more in a bit. It's usually paired, chronic anxiety is paired with cortisol surge and or depletion. So cortisol comes from the adrenal glands. It's our repair and anti-inflammatory molecule, but it's also what tends to rise when we wake up in the morning. And then it also can become too elevated chronically and add to that physical sensation of anxiety. And these all sort of, anxiety and worry both come out of a larger pool of fear. When Alexis was talking about the tiger, when we were cavemen and it was just tiger coming to get us, and then the tiger was killed and danger has passed, that sudden fear that comes with a surge of adrenaline. If you've ever been really, really scared by something, your body will shake and you feel a racing heart, and you often will get hot or cold, but it comes and goes pretty quickly. You'll feel all of those symptoms really intensely and then they go away. And really the underlying fear, I think, of all of this is fear of death. Something is coming at us and we think we might actually die. And anxiety is just sort of that low grade, dumbed down fear, so to speak. It's not quite as sharp and intense, but it's like this constant buzzing, chugging engine. So what do we do when we know we have stress and anxiety in our lives? Self-care and stress management. So the basics: food, sleep, and fun. I'm not going to go a ton into food. I've done that in some of our other talks, which you can go back and look at if you like. But good, healthy, nourishing food is just foundational to our health overall, but especially to feeding all of the parts of our body that support our ability to withstand stress and keep us from feeling anxious or depressed or irritable. And then sleep, of course, we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But sleep is where we recharge, the body restores itself. Inflammatory damage from the day, just normal damage from being a human, gets repaired at night while we sleep, and fun. Doesn't seem to be a lot of fun going around these days, and I can attest to that personally sometimes too. It's easy to get bogged down right now and forget to get out and enjoy yourself. And you'll notice a lot of the photos in the background tonight are me or nature and my dogs, because that's one of the things that I do for myself, is to get out with the trees, go hiking, and part of the fun is watching the dogs enjoy themselves. So, some daily foundational rituals that really help to support our overall health and help give us adaptability in stressful situations. So, Alexis talked about these already, so I'll go kind of quickly through them, but you want to sleep and wake at the same time every day. That means even on weekends. This really, really, really supports our adrenal system, helps keep our energy balanced. We really do want to go back to those days of the caveman in some ways. We want to be as close to the natural rhythms as we can in modern society. So these are the simple things we can do. Try to eat meals at the same time every day as well, within an hour or so each day. Eat 3 meals a day. Snack only if you're hungry, but really try to get in regular meals. Space between meals is vitally important for gut health. Eat slowly and enjoy your food with all your senses. So before you actually eat, look at your food, smell your food, make your food beautiful, put in lots of vegetables with lots of colors, put in fresh herbs. You should engage all of your senses, which has an actual physiologic purpose to get your stomach nice and full of acid before you throw food in there. But it also just gets you to salivate a little bit, like, oh, I can't wait to eat that food. You get your whole body involved, and digestion will be so improved if you do that. And then chew slowly, eat with other people if you can. Go to sleep by 10 if possible. The more hours of sleep you get before midnight, the more healing. So I always tell my patients that between 10 and midnight is actually worth 4 hours of rest in your body. You get more restorative sleep in that time than you do after midnight. And then move your body every day to your own capacity. So don't overdo it, don't underdo it. Find what works for you, find some sort of movement you enjoy, and then just do it every day, even if it's just a small amount. That really helps our lymph flow, which helps us get rid of toxins, helps keep everything moving. So circadian rhythm is part of the reason we do all this. We are part of nature. We are animals, just like all the other animals on the planet. And we are literally, our physiology and our hormonal system is literally tied to the movement of the earth, the moon, the stars, all the planets, the pull of the oceans from the moon. All of that is why the circadian rhythm exists. It's a natural internal process that regulates sleep and wake based on light and dark, but it's linked to the rotation of the earth, which is roughly a 24-hour. We've skewed that a little to fit our clocks and calendars, but about every 24 hours. And this is just a nice diagram. It doesn't put the hormones in here. I couldn't find one that did both. This tells you what happens at certain times of the day. And this is very specific, and it's not individualized. This is human physiology. So when people, I've had this question, when people work night shift where they're awake at night and asleep during the day, they're going against the circadian rhythm, and they are known to have more health problems because of it. So part of that circadian rhythm is the cortisol and melatonin cycles, and this is part of why sleep is so important. Cortisol and melatonin are opposites. You can see there that the blue line is cortisol. So during the sunny phase, that little blue section, it's high. It's what wakes us up. And then it gets nice and quiet and low at night when melatonin rises. So they support each other in being opposites. They can both become dysfunctional. They can both become depleted. Melatonin particularly is very depleted when our immune systems are challenged, because they both play an integral part in the immune system function. So cortisol wakes us up and melatonin puts us to sleep. And we can supplement both of these, although melatonin obviously is more common because so many people are taking it. So some stages of sleep. It's important that we get 8 hours of sleep or more if you're tired, stressed, or chronically ill. So if people are tired, you should always allow yourself to sleep more or take a short 10 to 30-minute nap, or even just lay down in the late afternoon and close your eyes and do nothing, put an eye pillow on, just let your body rest for 10 to 30 minutes. If you sleep more than an hour during the afternoon, you can disturb your sleep cycle if you're prone to insomnia or sleep disturbance. But those little tiny naps are refreshing to your adrenals, and they'll often help you sleep better. So you can see that 4 to 7 hours is kind of lighter sleep with a little deep. And then the REM sleep, which is when we dream, is only 1.5 to 2 hours, and that's really early morning. That's why we tend to wake a little bit more easily in the early morning. And then those stages of sleep have reasons. So that falling asleep, which can be, falling asleep can be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, and that's fine. Sometimes people will say, oh, it takes me so long to fall asleep, like 20 minutes. Well, that's not that long. Sleep should require a little bit of effort. If your head hits the pillow and you pass out instantaneously, you're overtired and your adrenal system is probably very depleted. So it should take a little bit for you to feel sleepy and to fall asleep. And then everything slows down. Our body goes into rest and repair mode, which, like Alexis said, this is why you don't want to eat before you go to bed. Because if you put a bunch of food in your body, it's going to be in digestion mode, which requires a lot of heat and a lot of energy. And what the body wants to do is it wants to slow the heart rate, it wants to drop the body temperature, it wants to get into that deep sleep where your muscles and tissues, all that oxidative damage can be repaired. And then you get into that really, really deep. The REM sleep is where the body's sort of taken out of it. The body's paralyzed and then dreams begin. So all these stages are important. And when people don't dream or they never remember their dreams, that's also a sign that there's stagnation in the system, they're not getting enough exercise, or they're overly tired. So what can we do from the supplement and nutrient piece? I didn't do a lot on this tonight either because we've done this in a couple of other webinars, but the number one thing is always start with diet. You want a healthy, well-balanced diet, and without getting into too many of the details, that means good fats, which in my mind are olive oil, coconut oil, and grass-fed butter or clarified butter, also called ghee. Those are so important for the hormonal system and the brain and the nerves. And lots of cooked vegetables, the rainbow. As many vegetables as you can possibly get in. And cooked vegetables are much easier on your digestive system. You're going to get the nutrients out of them much more easily. And since most of us have some mild imbalance or to severe imbalance in the gut, cooked vegetables are just much easier on the system. Raw is okay during the hot times of the year, like the middle of the summer, but for the most part, you want to do cooked vegetables. And that goes for any specific diet you're following. So whether you're vegetarian, vegan, or carnivore, the base, the foundation of that food pyramid should be vegetables. And then the specific things, so adrenal support, because the adrenals produce cortisol and sleep helps us make melatonin, we want to make sure that both of those areas are supported for optimal energy, but also for that repair at night. So if you're feeling really tired during the day, you want to give your adrenals a little lift. And there's some herbs listed here. There's so many adrenal support formulas with various different herbs. Rhodiola, schizandra, ashwagandha, ginseng, both American and Siberian. Cordyceps, which is one of my favorite. And then glandulars, which are similar to thyroid hormone, but it's adrenal hormone made from the adrenal glands of usually they come from pigs, and various other glands as well. I have my favorites. There's one called immunogland plex that I love that is a combination of 4 different glands. And those are really useful if people's adrenal systems are just utterly depleted and, they can't get out of bed. They're just dragging along. Coffee barely does anything. That's when the adrenal system's probably depleted. You probably want to test it and see. And then glandulars can really help get them out of the trenches. One note about ashwagandha, it's in almost every adrenal formula you see. It's a wonderful herb, but it does, people who tend to be depressed, lethargic, heavy feeling, or really irritable and angry should stay away from ashwagandha. It's a very hot and heavy herb, and I've seen it make people more depressed and irritable. But if you're prone to that, more anxious, worried, kind of thin and sleepless, ashwagandha is a great, wonderful grounding herb. So go for it. Morning and night if you're one of those people. It's also sedating mildly, so it's great for bedtime if you have sleep issues. And then sleep support melatonin, of course, 3 milligrams is what the body makes naturally. So 3 or above. High doses have been given long term with no problems. Although I find most people find what works for them. They find a dose that works. If falling asleep is a problem, you want to take quick acting. And if staying asleep is a problem, you want to take sustained or prolonged release. So you get a little burst about 4 hours after you fall asleep. And then there are lots of different sleep supportive herbs. Valerian, which is very sedating, hops, chamomile, passion flower. There's a whole bunch of them. My 2 favorites are motherwort and skullcap, which help with that parasympathetic nervous system. They just help calm the entire nervous system. They don't really make you sleep so much as they calm that anxiety and worry. And motherwort is also a wonderful heart herb. So they're great as a pair. Phosphatidylserine is one of the things I use all the time. If you feel revved up at night, like that coffea cruda picture, phosphatidylserine helps take down excess cortisol. Or if you're one of those people that just drags all day long and then 9 o'clock hits and you're wide awake, your cortisol levels are probably flipped. They're high at night and low during the day. So phosphatidylserine over time will help take down that nighttime cortisol and help you sleep less fitfully. And then GABA and L-theanine are calmers of the mind and the body, and you'll find those in a lot of both adrenal formulas and sleep support formulas. And they're great, especially if you feel physically wired or trembly or agitated in your physical body. Those can both be really, really nice. And then enjoyment. So this is something that I have to remind myself to do. Sometimes I get buried in work, and I love my work, but sometimes I have to remember to look up and laugh. So these are my 2 dogs basking in the sun in Maine, just enjoying their lives of being dogs. For those of you who don't know, I moved from Maine a couple of years ago. So being out in nature is just a wonderful way to relax, but also trees literally help our immune system to function better. So tree bathing is a real thing. Going out and hanging out with some trees will boost your immunity. Plus, you give them CO2 and they give you oxygen. It's a great trade. Spending time with friends and family, this is one that's tricky during COVID, so making connections and keeping them in any way you can. Pets are known to calm us. They're known to help with brain function as people get older. They give us a sense of companionship. They help us produce endorphins in the brain. So if you're an animal person, pets are a great way to go. And then laughter also boosts our innate immune system. And it's just great for the body in general. And movement, which we talked a little bit about. Just moving in any way that you enjoy moving. And then we're going to come to my favorite part here. So when it isn't just about stress management, and these are the people that show up in my office. So ask yourself these few questions. This tree, I have to stop. This tree is amazing. I took a picture of this off of a trail in Fairfax. It's the biggest oak tree I have ever seen. So ask yourself about your current symptoms. If you're feeling stressed out, you're having insomnia, you're feeling anxious, is this something chronic? Have you always tended toward anxiety or worry? Or are these symptoms totally new? Is it something you've really never had and it just happened maybe in the last couple of years or the last few months? And do your symptoms, any symptoms in your body, so this could be intestinal, gut symptoms, it could be mental, emotional symptoms, it could be body pain. Does anything in your body get worse when you're under more stress? Do you have any autoimmune diagnoses? So that could be the most common one, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, so acute autoimmune thyroid condition where you're on thyroid medication, or any of those Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, the gut diagnoses, Sjogren's, there's a whole bunch, or even just something like irritable bowel syndrome. So any kind of gut dysfunction. Do you get heartburn? Do you have regular bloating? Do you have constipation or diarrhea? This is something that really, really gets ignored and missed. I think even in the natural medicine world, people say that they poop normally and we just take them at their word. I'll warn you, if you come to see me, we will talk in depth about poop because I like to know the details. So like Alexis mentioned, gut dysfunction of any kind really, really undermines our ability to deal with stress and to sleep well and to absorb nutrients and so many things. So if this is present, just ask yourself, this is a checklist. Are you taking multiple medications, pharmaceutical medications, to manage conditions? So high blood pressure, cholesterol, thyroid. Do you seem to have to add new medications each year as you get older? And do you have exercise intolerance or aggravation that suddenly the things you used to do are making you feel terrible? You can't do that spinning class anymore because you're in bed for 2 days afterward, or you just can't walk up the hill like you used to. These are all signs that it's not just you unable to manage stress, that there's probably something in your physical body that's working against you. So, and a special note about anxiety in this matter, I've noticed a lot lately during this pandemic that everyone comes in and says they're anxious or they feel stressed out. And some of them are chronically anxious people who's been around their whole life, and that's maybe a slightly different picture. But a lot of them will come to me and say, this came on pretty suddenly. It's a new pattern for me. It's not something that's happened before. It seems to come out of nowhere. There's really no trigger. Like, I don't feel any more stressed than usual. I'm not suddenly having social anxiety. I just really can't pinpoint it. But it does seem to get worse in the evening, or maybe even as I approach going to bed at night. And it might be worse in certain places, like every time they go to work and they just started a new job, or every time they're in their new house, or every time they visit grandma, like they notice that anxiety gets worse. And a lot of times this anxiety comes on with this feeling of impending doom, but it doesn't have a focus. They don't feel like people are going to die or that they're going to die. It's just something bad is lurking and it's going to happen, but they can't give you specifics. When I hear this kind of anxiety, it makes me think that there's some sort of chronic illness underneath it all. And chronic illness, really, what I'm talking about when I say that is that there's been repeated acute stressors over the course of life, which this happens to all of us. Things like toxins and infections, and just repeated infections like chronic sinus infections or chronic food poisoning, something that happens a lot. Those things build up over time. We end up with too many toxins like mycotoxins from mold or yeast overgrowth or heavy metals or glyphosate. And then we get all of these infections like Epstein-Barr, which is mono. Alone, we maybe get sick and get past it. But when all of these things start to pile up on top of each other, so someone might have mycotoxins and yeast overgrowth in their gut, and they maybe were bit by a tick and they don't even know it, and they had a reaction to Lyme a long time ago. Their body and their immune system starts to lose adaptability. It's no longer able to effectively address all of these things that are attacking the body. Things that would normally just be an acute stressor the body can't throw off easily. And that throws the immune system into a confused state where it just doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have enough energy or nutrients, and it can't deal with everything. And that's often when you get autoimmunity. The body will start to attack itself because it's confused. So this is really, I only throw this in because I've just heard, especially a lot of women will say, I'm just not managing my stress well. We tend to take it all on ourselves and think that we're doing a bad job. Even if we're doing all the things Alexis mentioned, like we've got great sleep habits and eating a good diet and we're doing all the right things, but still these things are coming up. That's when you need to step back and say, okay, maybe I really am doing the best I can do, and there's something else working against me. And this is what I love to do. I love to do the investigating of this piece. So I just want to throw this in one last little bit because it's so cute. Watching animals play sometimes can remind us to play. This was a snowstorm in Maine where we got 18 inches, and then 3 days later we got another 18 inches. So we had 36 inches of snow. And my little hairless, skinny dog decided she was going to run out into the snow and try and find a rock that I threw. So if you're feeling down, watch videos of dogs or cats or puppies or babies or kitties. And you can hear me laughing in the background because it was really funny. So much fun. Animals and kids have so much fun doing the simplest things, and it's really good to remind ourselves that we can do that too. So that is it, everyone. If anyone has any questions or something I missed that you want me to talk about, feel free to unmute and just ask or throw it in the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's your take on CBD for sleep?
CBD is not something I typically use. I haven't seen it help much for many people. I have the occasional patient that uses it and gets relief. The things that seem to work better are the ones that are paired with THC. And I just tend to stay away from that because I think that THC is a little bit too clogging to the channels. The plant itself is a very sticky plant, and it tends to stick in the system and can cause kind of an energetic clogging. And I find that I often don't need it, that herbs and other things work a lot better. So,
Thanks.
yeah. But if it works, when it comes to sleep, I feel like whatever works, and you have to find, everyone has to find the cocktail that works for them. And because I'm dealing with a lot of people with complex chronic illness, almost everyone has sleep issues. When they don't, I praise the Lord. Like, oh, you don't have sleep problems. That's wonderful. But because so many of them do, we have to find the right mix of things that works for them in the short term. And of course, the goal is to get people off of everything so they can sleep naturally on their own. But sometimes that just takes time because we have to remove whatever's in the way so that they can get there.
I can see that there was a question in the chat from a long time ago. Sorry if I missed this in the beginning, but for situations like stress or anxiety that can be more chronic and less acute, when do you take the appropriate remedy? Like if I feel irritable and stressed every day, would I take it when I wake up? Would I take it every day? And so this is the complex gray area between acute care and chronic care. So in an ideal situation, if you're stressed every single day, a better thing to do is to get chronic care, where a person like me or any other homeopath would be looking at your whole constellation of symptoms, finding a remedy just for you, so that you would take that remedy every day or once or whatever the homeopath prescribed, and that your system would just calm down in general, so you wouldn't need to take an acute remedy. Your anxiety would be relieved. So here today we're talking about acute care, which, and maybe you have acute anxiety post-election or pre and post-election, let's say, that hasn't resolved yet. I mean, I think that was the most stressful thing I've ever been through. And so that's a more short-lived situation, even though it was kind of extended. That would be a time to take the remedy maybe in the morning when you woke up, and then you'd feel better, and then you'd take it again the next day. But that over time, that situation itself resolves so that you don't need the remedy anymore. That's the thing about acute illness. It's like you get the flu, you take a remedy, your symptoms get better, you don't need to take it anymore. The flu doesn't keep coming back every single day. But if it did, you'd need to go see Sangita to figure out what your underlying, bacterial or viral infection issue is. So what I would say is try it out, take it in the evening, take it in the morning, take it at the time that you most likely feel anxious or the time that it comes up for you, and see how it works for you. It is something that you can take every day, but not long term. So the idea is to get you through a bad patch, and then your system is able to reset. And you can use the lifestyle changes to help solidify and cement those changes. You can see someone like Sangita to get to the root of what is physiologically going on. You can come to someone like me for more global permanent change. And let me know if that does not answer your question or anyone's question about that. Any other questions, anyone else? Well, I think I'm happy to answer more.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I guess we'll just call it done for tonight.
Sounds good. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciated seeing you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are you guys going to send out that presentation?
We
From
will.
tonight?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and the recording as well. So we'll send you a link to the recording so that you can watch again if you missed part of it or something.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you all so much. It's been wonderful seeing you.
Yep. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.